everybody upgrading everything is nice, but it literally won't happen for like 90% of the players. Or payers. Not players, payers. Okay. As I said, this is very genre specific. Some games like again Survivor.io, they have pretty straightforward upgrade inventories based on HP damage scaling, so that's of course normal and pretty straightforward. Then we have stuff like Candy Crush or Puzzlers, where we don't have inventories or HP damage scaling or like gold money upgrading. We have levels.
It's 4 a.m. and we're rolling the dice. Matei drops knowledge made of gold and ice. Felix with ads making those coins rise. Jakub designs worlds chasing the sky. We're the 2.5 gamers, the midnight crew. Talking UA adverts and game design too. Matei, Felix, Jakub bringing the insight. We're rocking those vibes till the early daylight. Matei, UA, master eyes on the prize. Tracking data through the cyberspace skies. Felix stacks dollars like a wizard in disguise. Jakub's crafter realms lift us to the highs. 2.5 gamers talking smack. Slow hockey stick, got your back. Ads are beautiful, they light the way. Click it fast, don't delay.
Hello. This is 2.5 Gamers podcast. Again, this is one of those solo episodes where we focus on one topic and go through it through kind of a more detail in this kind of a learning fashion. So, yeah, this time it's my turn, and today I'm going to talk about economies, game economies, and spend debt. Like favorite topic of mine, and I guess a lot of people in the industry. It's kind of a little bit of a, I would say, a mirage that everybody keeps talking about, but nobody actually, shows how to do. So yeah, today I want to go through some kind of practical example and pretty much dive deep into like how these things work, get some terms out there, and like how to kind of approach some things. And yeah, let's hope we learn something together. Okay. So let's roll the presentation. So as said, the focus will be the economies and their spend debt. So what is spend debt by its sense? Sometimes you can hear these kind of giant numbers associated with certain games, and yeah, like this game you can spend that much there and so on and so forth. So this is what spend debt basically means, is that it's a money value representing the total amount of money a user can spend in a game until there's nothing else to buy. That's how we would define spend debt. This can be a little bit of clunky because games, especially free-to-play games, are content driven, so their game is service, so they add more and more content. Therefore, this number keeps increasing. But for now, let's kind of stick with this one. The more important term is effective spend debt, because effective spend means a specific set of resources needed to get to the end game access all the end game content, and those are two different terms. And yeah, before we start adding anything into the game, let's first try to understand which of these means what on some kind of practical example. So yeah, what is effective spend debt? You can think of effective spend debt as your pretty much fully upgraded deck on Last League in Clash Royale, or fully upgraded deck of characters in Empires and Puzzles, or fully upgraded inventory in Survivor.io, which is pretty much like the set of things that were able to carry you to the end game. That's like, because you didn't really need to upgrade everything, like all the characters, all the heroes, all the equipment. It's just that like kind of one set. So how do we actually calculate this thing and get to the actual numbers, the dollars of this? So let's continue and stick with Clash Royale for now. So what you do is you go to the anchor prices of the shop. Every game economy has this kind of a hard currency, if they have a hard currency, or could be just soft currency, and the basic anchoring, meaning the base prices for those like small and high price points, where you have the amount of hard currency that you can buy for real world money. This is the connector. That's why it's called anchoring, because it's anchoring the economy to the real world value. What you do is, you check and you see how much it actually costs based on these gems in these values. Usually there's a discount, so always like the smallest pack has the worst price, kind of hard currency per dollar, and then it goes up all the way usually to something like 50% discount on the highest one, like those $100 packs. So you see it's like pretty much half of it. And we get some numbers finally. So what we do then is that we go into the content of the game and calculate how much stuff actually costs and how much, because now that we know how much one hard currency gem in the economy costs, we can then recalculate it to soft currency, for instance, that we need for upgrade costs, or like how many chests we need to buy or open, to get all the cards for a specific character to upgrade. So suddenly we take all of these things and count them up, yada yada yada, and we end up with something like this. Beware, this is an old spend debt. Clash Royale currently, I think, is way beyond 120 characters, so this is just old. But for the example purposes, it's enough. Doesn't matter. So we have here, for instance, let's imagine this was done at the point where Clash Royale is like this. So we have all the common cards, all the rare cards, all the epic cards, all the legendaries, all together 104 cards, and we see that the total shard value, I mean the actual shards that we would need to kind of get in order to get all these cards to fully max level, would be something like 14,000, and then we would need to have also the gold to upgrade those cards, which would be something like 6,000. So therefore, if we all count this up, we see that the whole economy can absorb something like 20,000, and by that time, if we calculate it hopefully right, we have everything upgraded. But this is really everything, and I mean every single card in the game. Do we really need that? We probably don't. So if we again look at the effective spend depth, because the deck has 8 cards, so I just created a random number deck here, where there's like 2 legendaries, 3 epics, 2 rares, 1 common. Again, this is just my kind of randomness here. And by those numbers, you see that it's a completely different number. It's like 1/10 of the original, which is like 2K to upgrade all of these. You also need to keep in mind that in order to kind of get to the end game, you even won't have the cards at the beginning that we now have upgraded in the deck. So you need to upgrade also some cards along the way. So this number is, for this specific game, it's probably higher. But again, nuances, we won't go into detail. Principles are what we care about. So what I'm just trying to demonstrate here, that you see that you still need to count with a much lower number in order to kind of account how strong the economy really is. Because again, everybody upgrading everything is nice, but it literally won't happen for like 90% of the players. Or payers. Not players, payers. Okay. As I said, this is very genre specific. Some games like again Survivor.io, they have pretty straightforward upgrade inventories based on HP damage scaling, so that's of course normal and pretty straightforward. Then we have stuff like Candy Crush or Puzzlers, where we don't have inventories or HP damage scaling or like gold money upgrading. We have levels, and these levels usually drive booster consumption because we fail, we want to skip the fail state, get those +5 moves, so on and so forth. So this is a different spend. This would be something like averaging out like how much boosters you use per X amount of levels in order to get somewhere, yada yada yada. Much harder to calculate, but it still has, of course, spend up. And it's never ending because they keep adding like 40 levels every 2 weeks, now at 15,000 or what. Then we have Coin Masters or pretty much social casinos, similar setup where there's like never ending content, where we're still upgrading that resetting city through soft currency and getting the energy and stuff like that. Again, it's probably possible to calculate, just much more harder, but again, still it's possible. It just depends on how I would recommend to calculate this. You assume average player engagement, and based on that average player engagement, meaning like this amount of sessions per day, this amount of like levels played per day, rolls per day, you assume and you balance around that. Of course, once you have the actual game data, you double check that and adjust. But in the first draft, for like when you start the economy, you assume. There's just no other way. Like, sorry. So let's continue with an RPG because it's, again, as I said, very straightforward, so we can dive deep into it. One thing that I also want to mention is 4x, because 4x have infinite depth economies, meaning that 4x economies work on destruction of property, which never happens in all the other games, which is super powerful mechanic, meaning that the soldiers that you like takes you so much time to hire them buy and like farm resources for, they can be actually killed permanently in those battles, because again, my army gets killed and I don't know, 30% of the killed gets moved to the hospital, the other 70% gets killed permanently because the hospital capacity cannot accommodate for that, so they're dead. And I literally lost the progress, even if I bought it with money. That's why these economies keep getting so money hungry, because there's literally destruction of property. Similarly, also to something like EVE Online, where you read about these giant battles on the internet where all the starships and everything can go clash against each other, and there's like millions evaporated during the process because it takes so much time to farm for them, and then they're destroyed forever, permanently. So this is somehow similar. I don't think so that this mechanic has been explore properly in other genres. 4x is, I think, the only one that's kind of going for it because it's so cutthroat and, again, very specific. But again, we won't talk about it anymore. Just saying that this is the mother of all like economies. Moving on, so let's get to the basic example of something like Survivor.io. So how we actually create the spend depth now. Now that we know what effective spend depth is, what spend depth is, like how do we increase it? So Survivor.io launched August 2022, if I remember, with 6 slots in their inventory, and that was it. Weapons were giving you attack damage, the armor, belt, and boots were giving you HP, and that was it. Nothing else. 6 slots just there. Immediately, I guess the team very, very swiftly recognized that like this is just not enough, because people were kind of buying it off the shelves like there's no tomorrow, and getting it to the end of progression, which is the death of any game where you get to the end and there's nothing else to do. So they immediately add another inventory, which is called tech parts, which basically doubled the inventory size, because suddenly we don't have just 6 slots, we have 12 slots, where there's 3 more additional slots for attack and 3 more additional slots for HP, with some abilities, flavor, and stuff like that. But what's really important that they just added another progression layer here, whereas these things have their own gacha, these things have their own kind of separate inventory. So pretty much think of it as like doubling the inventory that you have, like Control C, Control V. You add a little bit more flavor into it, and suddenly you have double the spender, because again, you need to buy the first one already, which is there, and then the second one. What happens afterwards? Like, how do we go from here? We create another layer. Again, in this case, it was pets, which was added later, where, again, because we're scaling the economy with HP and damage, the pets gives us HP and damage. So we get pets to choose, upgrade, and move around, so on and so forth, merge together on a similar gacha-based, like merge gacha-based manner. Again, very simplistic. So I guess you see where this is really going. Later on, they added outfits. These are a little bit different, as those are like one-time thing, I guess, and you can really upgrade and take straightforward. But the important part, again, which is we're scaling HP and damage, because when you're adding these progression layers on top of each other, the other important rule is that they kind of need to be equal with each other. So let's say, imagine that your overall player power is like 100%, and I don't know, 20% is coming from base inventory, 20% from tech parts, 20% from pets, 20% for something like this. Because if you just prioritize one over the other, players will just go after the best one and ignore the one that's not giving them enough kind of performance for their resources. So this is also like buyer beware, like you need to also do this properly. Otherwise, you will kind of make it irrelevant. So make sure that these things actually impact the player progression in terms of those statistics properly. So what happens afterwards? We end up with base inventory. Again, I'm making this up, but just to give you an example, 10k spend depth for the base inventory. Then you get tech parts, which is not a 10k spend depth, so we effectively double that. Then we have pets, which isn't that robust, but it's still kind of robust, so 8k spend depth. And then we have outfits, which is 6k spend depth. So suddenly we add something like, 34K, which started as a 10K, kind of easy game. The other important thing to notice here that because this gets pretty bloated, as you see here, compared to our previous character that was starting with like very low stats, suddenly it goes into hundreds of thousands. You need to be aware that at some point these things stop working. You can just increase the numbers all the time. That just needs to be also interesting functionality to base this upon, to have new vectors of progression, not only in terms of stats, but also in terms of skill, in terms of strategic depth, so on and so forth. Again, it's a content treadmill, so in order to add all these progression layers, you also need to support them with new content. So it's not only that we add tech parts into it and suddenly our character is like super strong on the content that already is in the game. We need to add also a lot of content that is just much harder, because the only way to go against it is, again, to properly fit your second inventory of tech parts, because the content is just so much harder. And content that is based on HP damage scaling is just so easy to balance, because you just increase these numbers of HP and damage, and there you go. Again, imagine something like World of Warcraft. Like every expansion, they just increase the level cap very significantly, so they create an entry point for new players. But it's still same HP and damage, and they were already, I think, once World of Warcraft had to kind of re-roll the numbers back because there were just too many zeros, which happens on games that are live 20 years and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is just very important to understand, because even though it sounds easy once you know it, like it's not that easy. Yeah, as I said, content bloat is real, so beware, because at some point this hits diminishing returns, and you can just add another stat-based layer and like, okay, this will work forever. It won't work forever. It will work to some degree, and then it won't. Another advanced example here that we can go into is Honkai Star Rail from MiHoYo, where it's not only like inventories, it's also another like gacha based vectors through the event banners, because again, the content width, let's say, so we have exclusive gachas there with characters that are rotated every 3 weeks, and again, you can get them only through that time, then they get maybe somewhere in like half a year later or something like that. And you need to have those characters, because those characters are part of the elemental system, and in order to tackle all of the challenges of the game, we need to have different teams and different elements of those characters. So again, another vector that we added into it, instead of just a single inventory for a single character like in Survivor.io. And these characters have, again, many progression vectors, because we have the base character with his level, we have his light cone, which is pretty much based on the same premise as the character itself. Again, another gacha, another specific token that you need to find for fully upgrade, so on and so forth. Then we have his skill tree, then we have his inventory, which is another game of itself, because these pieces can roll stats that are, like a Diablo inventory, where it's like it can roll anything from defense to HP, damage, critical strike, whatever, and you're going after the best combinations, which has very, very low percentage chance to actually roll, because you don't want to end up with like a crit piece gear on a defensive character, whatever. So it gives you a lot of longevity in order to kind of fully equip your character. Then you have eidolons, which is the duplicates of your character from your gacha, where even though you got the character, it can be just so much stronger, where you get these duplicates, because it literally unlocks these skills, which are very, very powerful. Yeah, and as I said, each character represents a team role. So we are not, again, only going for like team dynamic, because, for instance, here the team is 4 slots, so like 4 deck slots. But we need different teams for different challenges, and the game even required us in some parts to kind of bring more teams that are fully equipped. So it's not only 4, it could be like 12 basically fully upgraded characters. Suddenly we are talking years of kind of playing this game in order to get to this point. Of course, if we not smash our wallet on the game. So yeah, this is again very important to understand, because these characters, as they're added into the game, they're usually, as I said, like tackling the content of the game. But again, this is a little bit more advanced part, where in Honkai Star Rail and like all these squad-based RPGs, you're also going around synergies between these characters, which creates like multiplying effects. Therefore, it's much more kind of harder and like deeper to kind of go there and to add more content, more spend depth into the economy, because again, with each specific character, we can adding a lot there. Okay, hopefully you learned something today. Yeah, feel free to let us know in the comments and or join our Slack, where there's always we have dedicated channels to that. Like there's a game design one, for instance, or the general one where you can ask questions. But TLDR, just for and kind of what I want you to kind of take from this one, make sure you understand the difference between the spend depth and the effective spend depth, what these two numbers mean for your game and how you can increase them. Make sure that you know how to actually calculate them, how you calculate them against competitor games, because that's also a very good metric. And like, oh, Remo, how much spend depth should my game has? And like the answer is like how much your competition or your competitors have in their economy spend depth. Like you can go and calculate, do it as a homework basically. It's not that hard, but again, takes time and practice, and it's a great exercise to kind of go. So yeah, make sure that you understand this, and then once you know this, make sure that you also understand the point here where how these progression layers are added, because it's not just about adding fancy new toys for your character to play with, but you also need to add the content to support it, so those characters and new toys can be used in content that is actually driving the usage of them, that is requiring them, because if it's not that, then again the game fails. Anyway, as I said, thank you very much, and see you on the one of the other solo episodes. Ciao.